All right, let's jump right in. We're diving into Machiavelli today. You know, the guy behind The Prince, infamous for being all about power and ruthlessness.
Right.
You sent us some excerpts from The Prince, some from the discourses, and that really interesting introduction. Looks like you want to go deeper than just the surface level.
Definitely. And that's what's so great about this deep dive. Machiavelli, he's not just some old philosopher gathering dust. His work is still relevant, still challenging, and honestly, still capable of changing how we see the world.
Yeah, so many people label him as like this power-hungry cynic. But is that the whole story? I mean, is that all there is to him? What about his motivations? What stood out to you in the introduction?
Well, the introduction makes it clear right from the start. Machiavelli wasn't just theorizing from some ivory tower. He was right in the thick of 16th century Italian politics. This guy was living it.
Exactly. And he wrote The Prince after his own political career fell apart, right?
Right.
So it's not just some abstract, lecture on power. It's coming from someone who's deeply involved, personally invested in his country's fate.
Absolutely. He was exiled from Florence, lost his position, basically forced to watch as Italy just like descended into chaos. That frustration, that sense of urgency, it's all over his work.
So The Prince, it's not just some cold analysis of power. We're also getting a glimpse into the mind of a man who truly loved his country and desperately wanted to fix it.
He even says in a letter from the introduction, I love my country more than my soul. You can feel that passion, that concern for Italy in everything he writes.
And that's what I find so fascinating. He's not afraid to, get into the nitty-gritty, to deal with the messy side of power, even if it means going against conventional ideas of what's right and wrong.
He's a realist through and through. He sees human nature for what it is, not what we wish it was. And that's where the priest comes in, right? This handbook for acquiring and maintaining power aimed at new rulers.
Okay, so let's dive into The Prince.
Huh.
Maybe the most famous and most misunderstood part of the book is whether it's better for a ruler to be loved or feared. And he says feared. Why?
Exactly. It's not about cruelty just for the sake of it. It's about understanding power. A ruler needs to be able to enforce order, even if it means, making tough, unpopular decisions. Remember, he's writing at a time of huge instability.
He even uses Cesar Borgia as an example, right? This notoriously ruthless figure. In chapter 17, Machiavelli argues that Borgia's cruelty, shocking as it was, actually had a strategy behind it. The goal was stability, order. But he's also careful to say this doesn't mean a ruler should just go around being cruel randomly.
Right, in chapter 6, he says cruelty should be strategic, not gratuitous. He's not advocating for a reign of terror. He's saying a ruler needs to be firm, they need to inspire respect, and yeah, a healthy dose of fear.
It's like he's saying, look, the world's dangerous. If you're going to lead, you need to be able to protect your state, protect your people, even if it means tough choices.
Exactly. That's where the concept of realpolitik comes in, focusing on practical stuff, power dynamics, rather than just abstract morals. Machiavelli is often credited with introducing this idea.
So instead of getting caught up in what should be, he's focused on what is, which is pretty radical compared to the idealistic philosophies of his time.
For sure. He challenges the idea that rulers should always be morally perfect. He says, sometimes a ruler has to act in ways that might seem immoral personally, but are needed for the state to survive.
Wow, that's a tough one to swallow. But it's a concept that's resonated with leaders through history, and we still struggle with it today. When do the ends justify the means? When is it okay to compromise your values for what you believe is the greater good?
Those are the questions Machiavelli forces us to ask, and they don't have easy answers.
Now, in The Prince, Machiavelli also gives a ton of practical advice for rulers. One big thing, having a strong military that's loyal to you personally. He's really against relying on mercenaries or those auxiliary troops.
Yeah, chapter 12 lays it all out. Mercenaries, they're only loyal to their paycheck. Things get tough, they're out. And auxiliary troops, borrowed from allies, they can be unreliable too. You're basically putting your fate in someone else's hands.
So he's saying a strong, secure state needs a power base you can absolutely count on. And for Machiavelli, that means your own army, citizens who are loyal to you and the state.
Exactly. And he even tells princes to arm their subjects in chapter 20. He says it creates a sense of shared responsibility for the defense of the state and makes it way harder to be conquered if your entire population is armed and ready to fight.
Interesting point. A well-armed citizenry isn't just a military thing, it's also key for political stability. Of course, Machiavelli, being the strategist he is, also knows this has to be managed carefully.
Oh yeah, he's not naive about power. He also says rulers need to manage those they conquer, maybe disarm some, empower others. It's all about playing the game well, knowing when to show strength, when to compromise.
Adaptability, understanding each situation, making the tough choices. And another warning he gives, don't be surrounded by yes men. He's got a whole chapter, chapter 23, dedicated to flatterers.
Because, let's be honest, being surrounded by sycophants leads to bad decisions. You need people who will tell you the truth even if it's not what you want to hear.
So Machiavelli gives advice on how to structure your court to encourage honesty. Basically, if you want to be a successful ruler, create a system where people feel safe to disagree with you, to offer different viewpoints.
He knew that good leadership isn't about being surrounded by people who always agree. It's about having different viewpoints, even if they make you uncomfortable.
Okay, so we've seen how the prince is this, like, hard-nosed, pragmatic take on leadership. But you also sent excerpts from the Discourses on Republics. And this is where things get really interesting. Here we see a different Machiavelli, focused on the common good, civic virtue, a government that serves the people, not just the ruler.
It's almost like two sides of a coin, you know? The prince is about getting and keeping power, sometimes by any means necessary. But the discourses are about something else. Preserving a state for everyone's benefit, not just the person at the top.
And what's fascinating is that he uses the Roman Republic as his model. He sees ancient Rome as this incredibly successful system, not because of some amazing emperor, but because of the collective will of the people.
Exactly. He's saying that republics, with engaged citizens ready to fight for their freedom and the common good, they're a force to be reckoned with. In Book 2, Chapter 2 of the Discourses, he directly compares republics and principalities, and he argues that republics do better over time.
And why is that?
Because they're focused on the common good. They draw on the strength and wisdom of the people, not just one person's decisions. He even points out, also in Book 2, Chapter 2, that love of liberty made those ancient people so hard to conquer. Their willingness to fight for their freedom, their dedication to the republic, made them incredibly resilient.
That's powerful. A nation so committed to their way of life, so devoted to their republic that they're almost impossible to defeat.
I know. And this is where you see Machiavelli wrestling with the need for strong leadership and the importance of civic virtue. It's not enough to have a brilliant prince. You also need citizens who are invested in the success of the state, participating in politics, ready to fight for what they believe in.
So we've got the prince, where Machiavelli's giving us strategies for getting and keeping power. And then we have the discourses, where he's all about the power of a republic, civic virtue, the common good. It's like almost a contradiction.
It is kind of like he's saying, okay, I get it. We need strong leaders, someone to make tough decisions, keep things running smoothly. But the most successful states, the ones that last, they're the ones that tap into the collective wisdom and energy of the people.
That's such a relevant point, even today. We're always debating the role of government, right? Individual freedom versus collective responsibility, and Machiavelli was wrestling with these same questions way back then.
Oh, absolutely. And what makes his work so timely is that he's not afraid to challenge us on human nature. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He sees people as self-interested, ambitious, easily swayed by fear or promises of gain.
Which is kind of a downer, right?
Yeah.
But it also explains why he's so focused on strong leadership. We need someone to keep those baser instincts in check, right? Channel that ambition into something good.
Yeah, he's not saying people are inherently bad, but they need guidance, sometimes even a little persuasion, to work towards the common good. And that's where a strong leader comes in.
But is he saying there's no place for morality in politics? Like it's all just manipulation and power grabs?
Not exactly. He doesn't say morality is irrelevant, but he says it has to be understood within, like, the context of what's politically necessary. What's morally wrong for one person might be justified for a ruler if it benefits the whole state.
So there's personal morality and then political morality, which I can see why he's controversial. I mean, are we okay with the idea that a leader can do things we normally condemn as long as it's for the good of the state?
That's the tough question, right? And Machiavelli makes us face it head on. He's not giving us easy answers. He's giving us dilemmas, things to think about, a way to approach these complex issues. And he does it in a way that's both insightful and kind of unsettling.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, I'm not going to lie, the world's not all sunshine and roses. Power is a dangerous game, and you got to know the rules if you're going to play, even if you don't like them.
Right. And he keeps using history, especially Rome, to make his point. He's showing us how power has been used, for good and bad, throughout time.
And it's not just about individual rulers. In the discourses, when he's talking about the Roman Republic, he also says that states themselves, even republics, can act in ways that seem morally iffy but are necessary for survival.
He's saying that sometimes on the world stage, you gotta make hard choices. You gotta do things that might not feel good to protect your interests, your borders, your citizens.
So it's not just individual leaders being ruthless. It's realizing that states themselves operate on a different kind of logic, a logic of survival, of self-preservation.
And this is where his deep understanding of history shines. He's seen empires rise and fall. He's seen how they react to crises, how they make decisions with huge consequences.
He's trying to, pull out these timeless principles from history, insights into power that work across cultures, across time.
It's like he's saying, if you want to understand how the world works, if you want to be a good leader, study the past. Learn from the mistakes and the successes of those who came before you.
And that's what keeps his work relevant today. Centuries later, we can see the same dynamics he was talking about, conflicts, power struggles, political maneuvering. It's all there.
He gives us a way to understand the world, tools to analyze tricky situations, to make sense of the chaos of power.
Now, we've focused a lot on the prince and the discourses, but we also have that letter Machiavelli wrote to a friend in the introduction. Such a personal look into his personality, his motivation, his state of mind when he was exiled.
It's really revealing. He talks about his daily routine, hanging out with villagers, his evenings reading and thinking about history and politics.
He says he dresses up every evening, goes to his study, surrounds himself with his books, his ancient courts of bygone men, and just feeds on knowledge. It's a beautiful image.
It shows his love of learning, his curiosity, how he needed to engage with big ideas even when he was shut out of politics.
And he says, straight up, why he wrote The Prince. Not for personal gain, but because he believes his knowledge can be helpful to those in power.
He's offering his hard-earned wisdom, hoping it'll help Italy escape the chaos and division of his time.
He's not sugarcoating anything. He's presenting a raw, sometimes disturbing view of power, but he's doing it because he thinks it's the only way to achieve real stability and security for its country.
He's like, here's the truth. Even if it's tough to hear, here's how the world really works, because knowledge is power. And Italy, with the right leadership, can overcome anything and achieve greatness.
So we have this tension in Machiavelli's work, this hard-nosed realist facing the dark side of human nature, but also this passionate patriot, deeply invested in his country's fate and hopeful that things can get better.
And that tension, that complexity is what makes him so fascinating. He's not handing us easy answers. He's giving us questions to wrestle with, problems to think about, and a way to understand how power works in the real world.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored Machiavelli's pragmatism, his realism, his focus on history, and his sometimes kind of unsettling view of human nature.
And we've seen how his experiences, being exiled, his love for Italy, all of that shaped his thinking and led him to write these amazing works that still challenge us all these centuries later.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. And then we'll wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and a challenge for you to consider as you continue exploring Machiavelli's ideas. So we've really dug into Machiavelli, haven't we? This complex guy who makes us rethink power, leadership, even human nature. The sources you sent, they show you're really engaging with this stuff. It's been great to unpack it all together.
It's amazing how relevant his work still is after all this time. You can see his influence everywhere, how we think about politics, strategy, even just how people get ahead in life.
It's like he gave us this, secret decoder ring for those power dynamics that are always there behind the scenes, from global politics down to office politics.
Totally. And something he keeps coming back to in both The Prince and the discourses is this idea that the times make the leader. Different situations need different approaches.
So a leader who's great during peacetime might not be the right fit for, a war or a crisis. Makes sense. He's saying there's no single right way to lead.
Right. And that's where his focus on history is so key. He's not giving us a checklist of good leader qualities. He's saying, look at history, study the greats, figure out what made them successful in their specific situations.
So instead of rules, he's giving us a framework, how to think about leadership, how to analyze situations, how to adapt based on what's happening.
And that's so valuable, especially now. The world's changing so fast. The problems we face are so complex, so interconnected.
Yeah, we're drowning in information, different sides yelling at each other, everyone offering simple solutions to problems that are anything but simple. Machiavelli reminds us that there are no easy answers. Power is messy. And good leadership, it often means making tough, unpopular choices.
He makes us think critically, question our assumptions, understand why people do what they do, see that there are usually multiple sides to every story.
He's not giving us a script to follow. He's saying, think for yourself. Look at the situation, understand what's going on, then make the best call you can with the information you have.
He's empowering us to be more strategic, to be aware of how power works, to navigate this complicated world more effectively.
And that's pretty empowering, even if it comes from a guy who's often seen as, well, cynical or ruthless. At his heart, Machiavelli was a realist. He saw the world as it was, not how we wished it to be.
And he believed that understanding the true nature of power, seeing the forces at work, would help us shape our own futures as individuals and as societies.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Machiavelli, we want to leave you with something to think about, something to chew on as you continue exploring his work.
Machiavelli said the times shape the leader. Different circumstances need different kinds of leadership, different approaches to power.
So here's our question for you. How would Machiavelli analyze the challenges facing leaders today, in your world, in the 21st century? How would he apply his ideas, his understanding of power, to the issues we face? What advice would he give to leaders navigating rapid technological change, global instability, all the social and environmental challenges?
It's a question worth thinking about, and we hope this deep dive has given you the tools to start exploring it.
Because that's what these deep dives are all about, right? Sparking your curiosity, giving you a framework for understanding complex ideas, and then setting you off on your own intellectual adventures. Keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep seeking knowledge that's both fascinating and useful. Until next time.
Did you get any of that?